Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my 2021 mid-year book freakout / check-in tag. I can't believe it is this late in the year to do this already. We're halfway through the year. This is what everyone says. It's crazy. It's also crazy, this tag that I've been cobbling together and doing for a few years. The mid-year freakout tag is the one that's like infamous, and people do it every year. And then I think the check-in tag was popular for a year or two a couple of years ago. And then I've also sprinkled in other questions that I found along the way. So I have a lot of attributions to leave down below. Also, well, this video is probably going to be long enough as it is, but I'm going to make it even longer because June is the time that I got my cat, Missy, who is currently trampling around in papers in the background, if you can hear her. So I figure I also use this video to sort of check in on her because as of 2021, we've been together for 3 years. Okay, now on to the meat and potatoes of this tag. I'm going to go through all the questions that are here on my phone. Starting with question number 1, which is, how many books have you read so far this year? And so far this year, I've read 52 books. I feel pretty good about this. I have an unofficial kind of goal that I'd like to read 8 books a month. I'm okay if I read only 6. That's kind of my limit at the bottom there, that I want to read at least 6, but I'd be much happier with 8. And all this year I have read 8 books or more every month, so I'm feeling very good about myself. Question 2 is, what is the best book you've read this year? And I feel more conflicted about this, but I have to go with Red Comet, The Short Life and Blazing Art of Sylvia Plath by Heather Clark, which I read for the BookTube prize. This is the first time I've put a biography as my favorite book of the year or the half year, which makes me think that I'd make people like Steve Donahue proud that my reading has evolved to this level. I feel iffy about it because in my heart of hearts, I feel like I'm a literary fiction girl. I feel like my heart belongs with, you know, the upper middle class Connecticut divorces. But they haven't been catching my fancy as much. I mean, I still read a lot of literature that would be classified as either literary or perhaps general or commercial fiction. And for the most part, I still like those books a lot even. I really like them, most of them a lot. But I think it's taking more for them to really transcend for me to really love them. So I don't know. I mean, I feel iffy about what's going on here, but when I look to the Sylvia Plath biography, I see an incredible character study in everything that I love in fiction and in books, I guess. And in a way, it's kind of unfair to compare it to other biographies just because of the ridiculous amount of information that Heather Clark had available for her. And the fact that this seems to be a very specific sort of biography that, you know, invites the author to write 1,000 pages of the nooks and crannies of Sylvia Plath's life. Not all biographies are meant to be that humongous, but this one is, and it's like the first of its kind for Sylvia Plath, and it really challenges a lot of the more shallow interpretations of who she is, and it challenges, you know, that narrative of her abusive marriage and all she is a suicide victim and that sort of thing. It really, you know, makes her a much more complex character, and it certainly also deals with her literary genius. So I really fell hook, line, and sinker for this one. Question 2 is the best sequel you've read so far this year, and of course I use this for more than just book 2. This is a book 4 in the Ember and the Ashes series, A Sky Beyond the Storm by Sabaa Tahir, the final book, in fact, in the Ember and the Ashes series. And it makes me verklempt because I've loved this series ever since book 1. I think it's gotten you know, only stronger as it's gone, or actually I would say probably A Torch Against the Night, book 2 is my fave, but every installment has been really strong. She has really stuck the landing here with her epic fantasy and the intense journeys that she's put her characters on, that she's, you know, no holds barred, you know, no mercy sometimes for these people, although I do feel like we got a moving and even redemptive ending for these characters without it feeling trite in any way. They really earned the journey and the character beats that they went on throughout these 4 books, and I'm really happy with where they ended up in book 4. I was pretty positive that I could put my faith in Sabaa Tahir to not mess up the ending, and she certainly didn't. And most of my feels are just in the fact that it's all wrapped up now, but I loved it so much. Question 3 is the best short story collection I've read so far this year, and I'm going with The Thing Around Your Neck by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I've actually had this book on my shelves for a couple of years, and then I just read it with my mom and auntie's book club a few months ago, and I think we all really loved this book. And this collection was really strong. I feel like Adichie is in the vein of a Jhumpa Lahiri in a lot of ways, with the depth she brings to the characters and the situations in the short stories. I've only read Americana by her other than this book, but I'm eager to get to her other books that she's read, especially her novels. I just feel like she has a wonderful grasp on characters and plot, and it just makes you want to dive straight in with them. So I'm excited because I feel like she's an author that could become a fave for me, I'm hoping. Question 4 is what is my most read genre this year? And I'm going by genre as I put them on Goodreads, which is very much my own thing, just based on how I want to differentiate between my books. Like I have both Jewish fiction and general fiction, and Jewish short stories and general short stories, and only a couple of nonfiction, you know, categories and, you know, that sort of thing. So going by my own categories, I have a tie this year. I have read 12 books each of general fiction and speculative fiction. Speculative fiction I put as a mix of science fiction and fantasy, and it runs the gamut of adult and YA, and actually this year I also included the Ichabod, which is J.K. Rowling's middle grade fantasy that she recently published, also in that group. So there we have it. The next question I have is new releases I want to read, and this is the part of my video where I shame myself on books that I've acquired to own that I featured in other videos, my anticipated reads videos, that I haven't yet read. So first we have a YA fantasy, Into the Heartless Wood by Joanna Ruth Meyer. This is her 4th published book of epic YA fantasy. She has a really fun and quirky style of world building that I very much appreciated. And also, I knew her in a way online through a NaNoWriMo Vidlo community several years back, so I should be getting to this. Next, I have The Galaxy and the Ground Within by Becky Chambers, speaking of another spec fic series that has reached its end after 4 books, apparently. This is adult science fiction, and actually the books are less intricately linked together. They all take place in the same universe, but they don't always follow the same characters around. In fact, usually they don't. So who knows, she could possibly return to this collection in the future, but I feel like for now she's reached the end of what she wants to say with these books. And I'm sad to see the series end, but I definitely need to end it along with her and read this book. Next I have The Light of the Midnight Stars by Rena Rosner. This is adult fantasy with a Jewish tint. This is actually sort of Jewish-inspired fantasy fiction. It follows a rabbi and his daughters. They have magic. They live in a slightly fictionalized Hungary, I suppose, where there is such a thing as magic, although the magic is with the Jewish characters in this case. It comes from King Solomon. She also sort of writes her own Jewish book based off of a text, a real text, and it's also based in part off of a fairy tale. So I'm very excited for this because it melds a lot of things that I'm interested in together. And I've read her other book, her first book, Sisters of the Winter Wood, and I liked that one too. Returning to literary fiction and beloved authors I've actually also already rambled about, we have Whereabouts by Jhumpa Lahiri. This is her first novel published in almost a decade, which she wrote in Italian and translated herself. So I feel like this is going to be a departure in a way, or a new venue for her, because this is a much thinner novel and I think a different writing style than the lyricism of her older works. But I really love her as an author, and I've been really compelled by her journey, so I knew I had to get to this. And finally, I put this one on a list of historical fiction books I want to read for the Goodreads Choice Awards this year, and then I found it ARC at a used bookstore, so I snatched it up. This is Half-Life by Gillian Cantor, which follows the life of Marie Curie, but actually it also does an alternate history for her, where she didn't go to school to advance her career, but instead took on a more traditional role as a wife and a mother. So in a way, I wonder if this will be a book that reminds us of what we might have lost if she went down that path, or it might, tell us of just other ways that her life could have gone, and like really flesh out her character in a way. It's an intriguing concept for me. It's different, I guess, than the other book I've read of Gillian Cantor's, which makes up a friend for Ethel Rosenberg, who was one of the only people in the U.S. who was executed for espionage along with her husband. But it was more, traditional historical fiction, I suppose. But I'm definitely looking forward to giving this one a go. Next, we have my most anticipated releases for the second half of the year. Most of them are coming out in November, but one of them is much sooner, on July 13th. Another one by Becky Chambers. It is A Psalm for the Wild-Built, which is a novella, again, outside of the Wayfarers series, which I was just talking about. This one is solar punk, and it is about robots. Next, I have Oh Beautiful by Zheng Yan, which I found through, researching on Goodreads, and I was so excited because a few years ago I read her debut novel, Shelter, and it was one of my favorite books of the year. So I'm very excited to see where she is going next. I don't even have to know a lot about the plot and what's going to be going on in this. I definitely am going to go give her a go. Then I'm going into sequels territory, of course, spec fic fan that I am. I'm starting with The Bone Shard Emperor by Andrea Stewart, which is the second in her Drowning Empire series. I just read The Bone Shard Daughter, the first in the series, earlier this year, and I really liked it. I'm excited to see where the story goes. It is epic adult fantasy. And finally, going into adult science fiction, I have the final book in the Expanse series, Leviathan Falls by James S.A. Corey. I do feel like this is sort of a cheat because I'm still several books away in my reading cycle from Leviathan Falls, but I love Expanse so much, I love the Expanse so much, that I know that I will be grabbing this up as soon as I can, and probably feeling a bit verklempt about that series ending as well. Next question is my biggest disappointment of the year in terms of reading, and for this I am going with a memoir, FAIREST by Meredith Talusan, which I read for the BookTube prize. It's always complicated to talk about disappointing books. I'm not that fond of being negative about books anyway, and of course disappointing connotes that you were really looking forward to a book that didn't live up. And this one just is it for me. It's always the one in the back of my head that I wanted to use for this question. Back when we were doing the long list for the BookTube Prize this year, this was one of the ones that I suggested that we put on the official list. I was excited to read about a transgender experience, and of course it's not fair for me to say, oh, well, this one book about the transgender experience was bad, how dare it, Well, first of all, I don't think it's bad. And second of all, she shouldn't be the only voice, of course, of the transgender experience. She's only her own. What disappointed me about this book is I feel like there was a shallowness to it in terms of what she had delved into with her past. I mean, she had described a past where she was rather skin deep about a lot of things, about her relationships. She lost friendships, in fact, due to selfish behavior, and I don't feel like, 20 years later she actually dealt with what that meant, or, dealt with herself honestly. It rubbed me the wrong way in terms of, I feel like, what a memoir should do, which is to be an honest reckoning with who you are and what you've done. I'm also not a fan of how she relates to her womanhood, which throughout this book is only based on her desire for men. And that just feels incredibly shallow and one-dimensional to me. And to a certain extent, that's personal bias. She's allowed to relate to her womanhood however she wants to, but it was certainly, a bit of a turnoff in a way for me, no pun intended. But still, there's a lot to recommend this memoir. Talusan has led a very rich and exciting life with a lot of things that people would love to hear about in terms of her upbringing in the Philippines and the types of experiences she's had, and of course the unique ways that she has interacted with the world, first as a gay man and then as someone coming into her own as a woman. So I do think a lot of people would appreciate parts of this memoir, but ultimately it just wasn't for me. For the biggest surprise, I am returning to Red Comet because I just feel like, who would have thought I'd end up being so in love by an exhaustive 1,000-page biography. I just still can't quite believe how much it grabbed my fancy, so there we go. For my favorite new author, returning to the Expanse, I'm going to put James S.A. Corey. Of course, it's only appropriate as a science fiction author that he has two heads. Okay, that was just bad. And of course, James S.A. Corey is a pseudonym, and these two men are Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank, who are the writers of The Expanse. I'm just really excited by this. I've been in love with the television adaptation for so long, and it was more than time for me to start the books. I've so far read 3 of them, and I've really enjoyed them. It's just been quite an interesting experience, of course, too, to relate them to the books, the differences and similarities and what have you. I'm just very excited. This is definitely one of my favorite series now. For newest fictional crush, like a lot of people, I can't really answer this question, so I've sort of adapted and made one of my own in its stead. This is my one original contribution to this tag that anyone can, take and snatch away if they'd like to. I adapt this question to my favorite relationship in a book, usually in fiction, but in this case I am going to use Red Comet again and talk about the relationship that Sylvia Plath had with her mentor, Mrs. Prouty, because I thought it was really amazing what this woman had done for her throughout the years. The first thing she did was allow Plath to go to school. She fronted the bills for her to go to Smith, but she also was an incredible emotional support throughout Plath's turbulent life. I think offering the sort of support that she couldn't get anywhere else. Not only that, but Plath was embroiled in what I think was the insane psychiatric community of the day, of the 60s and the 50s, and just how horrible it was. And she had to seem to have the most empathetic and also the most healthy advice for Plath during all of this, and she really looked out for her, continuing to help her financially and also helping her emotionally, even from afar when they were, a sea apart. So may we all merit such a mentor in our lives. Next I have newest favorite character, and I'm just going to flat out cheat here and not go for a new character at all. I'm going for Helene of Aquilla from the Ember and the Ashes series, and particularly from A Sky Beyond the Storm, because as I've mentioned, this is the last time I can talk about this character because the series is over now. And I love her ever since A Torch in the Night especially, which was really her time to shine. And it was that year, or shortly after that book came out, that I went to San Diego Comic-Con, and like an adult, I grabbed a poster of her from the publisher and put it up on my wall. You, Helene of Aquilla, are no swift burning spark. You are a torch against the night, if you dare to let yourself burn. Next question is a book that made you cry. And I probably could stick with The Sky Beyond the Storm, because I imagine I got a little teary once or twice, like, it's over, I can't believe it's over. But I've decided to go in another direction. I'm not sure this book technically made me cry, but it was certainly the most emotionally arresting. I mean, I had to take breaks sometimes just because the subject matter was just this harrowing. And the book I'm talking about is Our Bodies, Their Battlefields by Christina Lamb. Lamb is a reporter who has reported on a lot of issues of rape as used as a weapon in war, and she interviewed a lot of women in particular around the world about their experiences. This is a little bit of a controversial book, especially I think because of the emotional way that Lamb inserts herself in the story, that I think can be read by some as her kind of, patting herself on the back as being, some amazing person who brought these stories to light. And of course there's been other books out there and other stories that have gone into more detail about specific communities and, people, taking their reins themselves and telling their own stories. But I feel like her anger comes from the fact that she believes so deeply in the fact that these women and men deserve more of a voice than they get, especially when it comes to tribunals and the UN taking account of rape being a real war crime that deserves more attention. I feel like that's where her anger came in. That's how I personally saw it. And I just am still impressed by the fact that she, devoted a significant part of her career to traveling the world and making sure these stories got out there, because most of the time these types of stories don't get out there to a wider audience. And she really touched upon the fact of how ubiquitous rape in war is. And I think she occasionally tried to touch on what that means for us as a society, like throughout time, but for the most part, she was really interested in making sure that these victims got a platform to, tell their stories and, reclaim a bit of humanity again. But yeah, the details, of course, it's just harrowing, awful stuff. On the opposite end, I have a couple of books that made me happy. The first, I guess most traditional answer to this question is The Layover by Lacey Walden, because this is a breezy romance, just sort of a really fun beach read where you can get introduced to some quirky, fun characters and there's going to be a happily ever after at the end. But I have another reason for this being a book that made me happy, because I know the author personally. I'm part of a writing group with her. She thanked us in the back, in fact. I have known her for a few years and gone through a bit of her journey with her, and I'm just so verklempt that she is finally published. And this book is just a wonderful way to introduce her to the published writing world. I just came together so nicely with characters that are worth following and like an internal self-realization plot for, the main character, and just a lot of fun, travel, because the main characters are flight attendants, and Ava, the main character, has a history of wanderlust in her past that comes forth as she and her colleagues are stuck on the island Belize. Boo-hoo. So I feel like this is especially fun as we are hopefully ending our COVID quarantine and maybe can follow her, as it were, on some of her adventures. The second book that makes me happy is really more self-congratulations, but it is this one, Fault Lines, Exploring the Complicated Place of Progressive American Jewish Zionism. And it makes me happy because I wrote an essay that was accepted for publication in this book. So I'm so glad that I get to have my own name out there a little bit, and especially about a topic that is really close to the heart. So I'll link to more information about this book down below. My next question is my favorite review/booktube video. I feel like I might be saying this more and more often because every year, because around this time, for the last 2 years at least, I've made a MaybeMidrash video. MaybeMidrash is a readathon that I took part in April, and I particularly read a book of Jewish fiction and nonfiction, and then use my wrap-up video to draw out comparisons between the two. So this year I took The Orchard by David Hopin and Time and Difference in Rabbinic Judaism by Sarit Katan Gribetz. and I talked about what Jews are supposed to be getting out of text study as shown in both of these books. And, you know, I've read quotes and I connected them, and it was a lot of geeky fun. Next is the best book to film adaptation I've seen this year. And part of me wants to say The Expanse Season 5 because it is hands down my favorite bit of television from the past year. I absolutely loved that season, but I haven't read book 5 yet, so I feel like it's not really fair to talk about it in terms of an adaptation yet. So instead I'm going to go back to what I think I used last year as well, which is His Dark Materials, which is an adaptation of Philip Pullman's fantasy series, His Dark Materials. This year they adapted Season 2, and I thought they did an excellent job. I think I was especially thrilled that the child characters got such an important part to play. I was worried through some of, you know, the trailers and such that the adults would be overutilized and the stuff with Lyra and Will wouldn't be developed enough, but I had no reason to fear. I think it worked out really wonderfully, and I loved it. And I have to say, I actually did love how much they did include Mrs. Coulter, because Ruth Wilson is amazing in that role. Next is the most beautiful book cover I've purchased or acquired this year, and I have to return to a previously mentioned book again with The Galaxy and the Ground Within by Becky Chambers, because I went to great lengths, aka I went to Book Depository, to make sure that I got the UK cover, which is hands down superior to the US cover, period. And I'm so glad that all 4 books of the Wayfarer series I own are all of this beautiful UK cover. And in this case, it's purplish. It's really pretty. My next question is, what is my next big priority in reading? And for this, I'm going to highlight that in July, I try to focus on short stories because it's my birthday month, and I do occasionally try to write short stories myself. And this year, I'm going for a book that's been on my Goodreads TBR since 2016, so I'm also glad to be knocking this one out. This is Athletic Shorts by Chris Crutcher. And I put this on my list because one of the stories in here inspired one of my favorite movies of all time, Angus. So I'm a little concerned, a little nervous that the story won't live up to the wonderful hype in my head of the movie, which I adore, but I still very much need to give this a go, and I'm excited to finally be knocking it off the list. My penultimate question is, what has been my bookish highlight of the year? And part of me wants to say taking part in the BookTube prize, because honestly, I don't think anything can really touch that. The journey I've been on this year and last year, it's just been an incredible way to connect with the community and read books I never would have read otherwise, that, as you see, have sometimes turned into my favorite books. But since I say that all the time, I feel like I should say something else, something unique to 2021. And for that, I have to say, again, returning to The Expanse and finally reading the books that inspired one of my favorite television shows of all time, I think. It's been a great experience. I feel like the 2 men that comprise James S.A. Corey have created a world that is realistic when it comes to science, at least from what I understand of science and what people tell me, and also delves very realistically and empathetically into issues of politics and socioeconomic issues that might affect humans as we go into space and colonize the stars, or the planets, or the asteroids, or the moons. And again, it's something they do with a lot of empathy. There's a lot of violence in the story, but it's never without cost. It's never something the main characters, jump to. So it just has a lot of stuff that I really love and appreciate in terms of macro science fiction storytelling, and also with characters who are worth following. And the books live up to the series. And the final question is, what books do I need to read by the end of the year? And I have 2 answers this year. I have In Other Words by Jhumpa Lahiri. This was a nonfiction book that she wrote in Italian and was translated by Anne Goldstein about her experience of moving to Italy and learning Italian and what it meant for her personal identity. And the reason I have to read it this year is because one of my goals for this year is wanting to knock off all the books I added to my Goodreads TBR in 2016 And this book I added in 2015, so it's in the red. And the second book I want to add to that list is The Complete Stories of Dorothy Parker. Because for those of you who have been watching my latest Friday Reads videos, you know that I've been holding this book up and inching through it like a tapeworm, because I read one tiny story per week in this like 400-page collection. And I'm thinking every month, should I finish it this month? Should I finish it this month? Should I finish it this month? Well, anyway, I mean, I didn't finish it in May. I'm not going to finish it in June, but I'm thinking I'll try to finish it in July because, you know, July is my short story month. So it's an okay time to continue reading it, but then I got to finish this thing. I got to finish it already. So that about covers it for me now. I'll have lots of links to the Goodreads pages and my personal reviews and other pertinent information about stuff I've rambled about down below. I always have so much fun making this video and coming to terms with what my reading year has been like so far. And to be honest, as I was creating this video, I was worried that maybe it wasn't as impressive or as good as I thought. But I wonder if I overthink things sometimes. And then I go through all the rambling of this video, and I have so much fun, and I feel like no matter what, I've had a good time reading these books, or at least a good time talking about them. And honestly, most of these books I've really enjoyed or respected or appreciated in one way or another. Or I hope to, if I haven't gotten to them yet. Anyway, I should be back on this channel in a couple of days to do a writing-related video for my quarterly wrap-up, so stay tuned. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, everyone. Thank you so much for all the wonderful mid-year book check-ins and freakouts you've been making. I'll continue to watch them with glee, and I'll see you next time.